49ers season is upon us. Officially, the 53-man roster came out, and all we have now is a little less than 2 weeks until week 1. But there's so much to talk about. Nick Bosa is still not here. Who the hell is their kicker? What is the confidence level overall in this team? And what does Brock Purdy bring to this team that gives them so much confidence? We're going to talk about that plus much more next. All right, welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. And I got my guy, So Real, Sunil in the building, a new building, actually. What's up, Sunil?
Yeah, man. Just moved into the new apartment. Gonna try to get a nice little, pristine setup like you here sooner than later. But definitely glad it's Tuesday, because that means I get to chop it up with you for about an hour. So I'm excited about that, my man.
Yeah, the chat's already going crazy. I see you, Mike. I see you, Tom. I see you, CJ, Jason, Achy Dragon, Larry. There's a bunch of you guys in here. Brother Bob. All right, let's talk about it. 53-man roster got released earlier today. Now, there's some interesting things that have happened so far. We do know, or it sounds like, Austin Bryant and Kerry Hyder are going to be back on this team tomorrow once some of the roster moves go into place with players going on IR and what have you. So that is happening. There's obviously players that they said they would like to put on the practice squad, assuming they can sneak them through the waiver wire. But overall, 53-man roster, were there any surprises or just overall thoughts that you have on the moves?
I mean, the initial thought is the way, it's kind of nice how they group them in, by position groups and whatnot. And the offense in every single position group outside of quarterback, there's an all-pro on that, which was ridiculous, right? So that was pretty cool to see. And on the defense too, there's a pretty much an all-pro. Well, yet to be seen, because Bosa isn't signed, but there should be an all-pro, a majority of those, other than I think it was like corner. But yeah, I mean, overall, I think it was interesting that every single rookie made it, right? Because usually, the 49ers, that usually is a good sign that the 49ers possibly drafted good players that are going to, be impact players in the few years. And it had gotten to a point, last year where was, I think, the first year that some of the rookies they drafted didn't even make the team. So it was nice to see, all the rookie draft picks make the roster in one way, shape, or form. And I think the most interesting was the offensive line, just to see the guys that actually made it in that offensive line group. Obviously, we knew the 5 starters, and it was pretty. We obviously know Feliciano was going to make it, but those other picks, some of those left tackle like a Leroy, he didn't make the roster. Jason Poe, didn't make it. So some guys like that I thought would make the roster, but didn't end up making the roster. So pretty interesting. And I think defensive side, McCurry, Ball not making the roster was I mean, the linebacking core is so deep, like, it's pretty hard to make it there. But overall, I think it was pretty straightforward. I think the one player that didn't make it was Quantrez. That I was that one kind of was a little bit of a shock, just because that nickel position isn't solidified, I guess you could say, and he was another body that could be placed there. So I think that was probably the only shocker, but overall I think it was pretty straightforward.
Yeah, so we have Luter on the PUP still. We have Latu going to IR. His season's going to be done. Bosa is on the did not report list, and then they're bringing back Austin Bryant and Kerry Hyder tomorrow. You actually hit the nail on the head right there. My biggest surprise was Marcelino McCrary Ball not making it, while Oren Burks and Flanagan Fowles did. And for me, if I'm the 49ers, I was hoping that they would keep 5 linebackers. They would let Flanagan Fowles and Burks go, bring back McCrary Ball, and either have Deshaun Jameson or Quantrez Knight take that other spot. Was kind of where my mind was at. The 49ers obviously thought differently, and we'll see. I mean, Luter's still on the pup. I think the corner position right now might be a little bit light, but if Luter's good and he comes back healthy, I think they'll probably be okay. But those are 2 young players that potentially made it out the door that really could be important to this team. Now, again, we'll see tomorrow around, I think 9 a.m. is when waivers clear, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll start to see how the practice squad shapes out. If a lot of guys end up on the practice squad, then it's really much ado about nothing. But just in the moment, that was really the only thing that kind of stood out to me was like, but sometimes it's not about who the best players are, though, either, Sunil. It's about who you think you can sneak through to your squad. And
for sure,
maybe for them, they're looking at it and saying, okay, well, Burks is a special teams ace. People know that. No way he makes it through waivers, but McCrary Ball probably does. Not a lot of people know about him. So that could be the thought as well. I think there's a lot of that goes into it, a lot of strategy, and that's totally fair.
Especially now with, there's 4 teams that are familiar with the players on this roster, right? So, there's a little bit more competition out there. So you got to kind of play your cards close to the vest. But ultimately, the depth is, we're talking about depth pieces, but overall, the roster still is stacked, man. Like, obviously people say it's top heavy, but that top heavy is elite. So, at least the 22 that we could run out there is going to be tough for any, I don't think there's that many rosters that could compete with the top level talent that the 49ers have.
Do you have a fan or something on? Mike says he hears wind in the background.
Nah, it's dead dark, dead silent over here.
Yeah, shouldn't be any wind in the background. I mean, unless you're hearing the wind whistling outside from the hurricane kind of getting close, but usually this mic cuts all that stuff out. So I don't know.
Let me see.
Yeah, do you hear it now, Mike, now that he's muted? We definitely want the sound quality to be on point. So now that he's muted, do you hear it? No? I don't know. All right, we'll see. You can come back on, Sunil. He says. Either way, yeah, we definitely want the sound quality on point for sure. All right. Well, let's 53 man roster.
He said he was kidding.
Oh, I get it. Jeez. Well, it's funny that he brings it up because you and I talked about it.
We had that issue last week. Yeah,
I was like, your air conditioning or something was on, which I couldn't hear. But as soon as the show was over, when I went back to kind of cut it up or whatever, I could hear it. I was like, oh,
He found a sensitive point of this production. We let him behind the 4th wall.
Yeah. Shouldn't have done that. Goodness sakes. All right, let's talk about, there's a couple interesting things that definitely hit the news wire today. One of them was Jimmy Garoppolo's comments, and I'm sure everybody's heard it by now, but I'll reiterate exactly what he said. I'm not going to play what he said. You can go find it on all over social media, but you can actually find it on this channel as well if you want to actually hear it. But he was asked about his thoughts on Trey being traded to Dallas. He said, it's a weird situation. A lot of weird situations in San Francisco, but I'm happy for him. And then the follow-up question to Jimmy Garoppolo was, how do you think they've handled the QB situation? And he responded, how do you think they've handled it? And the interviewer said, I think it's been messy. And Jimmy starts laughing and says, yeah, that's a nice way to say it. I thought that was interesting. Jimmy G is not one to normally take shots. I think that's a pretty big shot coming from him. I mean, Mr. Professional over there. So overall, when you heard this or caught wind of it, what were your thoughts on what Jimmy Garoppolo said about the 49ers and how they handled the quarterback situation?
Yeah, I mean, who's better to comment on it than Jimmy G, that had to deal with it every single year? It felt like no matter what he did, it seemed like the 49ers, when they're in news flirting with whomever the top free agent was, of the moment. And yeah, I mean, look, the perception and the way that it's played out in the media, and the circumstances around the quarterback position. First with Jimmy G, now with Trey Lance. It's not wrong, right? Like, you can't sit here and no matter what way you can justify maybe some of the choices and some of the moves, but it's still messy regardless of the justifications and whatnot. So, I didn't look at it and think it was that big of a shot. I think it is what it is, right? We've every single offseason, Jesse, we've had quarterback controversy. That doesn't happen to a team that isn't a little bit at least messy when it comes to the quarterback position, right? So, I thought it was fair. I don't think he was necessarily like going hard in the paint, but he was stating a pretty factual, assessment of what the 49ers QB situation has been since Shanahan and Lynch have been in charge.
Yeah, definitely. I think he's accurate, but then I think the 49ers can also end up being right. You know what I mean? I think both can be true. I think in this moment, it's definitely a lot of people are firing shots at the 49ers. A lot of media that never really had gotten involved in it. It seems like there's a big shift in how the 49ers are viewed nationally all of a sudden with the way that they've handled this situation. And I think when a team like Dallas, who is another big market team, probably maybe the biggest of big teams, comes out and trades a 4th rounder for Trey Lance, and they've had some success at the quarterback position for quite a few years themselves, it makes things interesting and it allows people to kind of open up and take shots. But I do think it's important to remember that the 49ers can still be right in this situation. Like, were they wrong to get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo? I don't think so. Were they wrong to get rid of Trey Lance? I do believe so, but that's, only time will tell. Maybe they weren't wrong. And maybe Brock Purdy ends up being here for the next 10, 12 years, maybe longer, is your franchise quarterback, and it really doesn't matter. You know what I mean? So I think time will tell if the outrage, so to speak, was worth it. And maybe it is, and maybe it's not. But in this moment, I definitely don't think Jimmy G's wrong. This is a weird situation, and it has been a weird situation for really a while. I mean, we've talked about this position specifically since 2019. I mean, well before I was making content on YouTube. I remember having these conversations going into the Super Bowl with my friend, like, hey, should we go get Tom Brady after this season? Like, that was before the Super Bowl was played. And then afterwards, it was like really a conversation. So,
Jesse, can I let you in on a little secret?
Yeah, go ahead.
If Purdy doesn't have a ball out season this year, Kirk Cousins is going to be a free agent next season.
Yeah, no, I got you.
We'll talk about it again.
I understand. I get that. I get that. I'm just saying right now, we're like, this is in this moment, for right or wrong, however you want to slice it, this is the least amount of quarterback conversation we're going to have for a complete season for a while. And that's a nice change for an organization that has been having that conversation for so long throughout every season, and it's been warranted to this point. So I don't know if they're right or wrong in this situation, but what I do know is they've cut out the noise for the most part, because nobody's clamoring for Sam Darnold, nor should they be. And Brock Purdy really does deserve this year to kind of figure out, which way is he trending? Is he continuing to trend up? Does he flatten out? Does he trend down? Where does he go? But either way, he's given the opportunity to be the guy. And I think that's really what this team has needed for a while now.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of emotions, I think, surrounding the Trey Lance situation. But like you mentioned, I think the underlying point is it's at least finally resolved for good or bad, right? Ultimately, time will tell if it was the right decision or not. But you had always meant you had said a lot, in multiple streams that we've done, is that if you truly believe Brock Purdy's the guy, then you should trade Lance. Well, for however way you feel about how Shanahan handled this, how Lynch handled this, they finally made a choice. They finally made a decision. They went all in, for better or for worse. And I think ultimately now we get to see, what that choice is, what their decision making is, and they could be judged based off of this versus that half in, half out type of situation that we've been dealing with. And ultimately, I think that's what's the most messiest about the 49ers is they tend to try to have it all. And I think that's what ends up being messy. But at least now there's no mess, right? At least now you know who QB1 is, you know who QB2 is, you know who QB3 is, and there's not like pressure that Sam Darnold is, should be QB1 or anything like that, which would have been the whole season if Trey was still on this roster.
Raymond, I'll take the blame. Listen, I get blamed for a lot of things, so just add it on, man. Add it on. 808 Niner says they better get Willis back. Ooh, interesting. Yeah, maybe there's a lot of players out there that are pretty good that may be available as well. So we'll see. Official B&A Music says Jimmy hit San Francisco with the deep shot that we needed in 2019.
Nice callback.
That's good. Keith Murphy says just because you find your wife after cheating doesn't mean you weren't messy. That's very, very true. That's a bad. I've seen that happen. In my life with people I know. So yes, very messy situation. And that also can be true, but maybe they found their wife, I guess. Keith Murphy says he's been a member for 18 months. I shout out to you, Keith. He says if Purdy don't ball out, Kyle and John will be free agents.
I don't agree with that.
Yeah, because they have the Kirk Cousins thing. You know what I mean?
They have the Kirk Cousins thing, and ultimately the team is still successful. Like, I know it's like Super Bowl or bust, but they're competing every single year. They're like right there, and the roster outside of the quarterback position is elite. It's not easy to build a roster the way that they have. It's not easy to draft it the way that they've drafted and develop. Like, they develop players here too, outside of maybe what people believe they develop the quarterback position. But as far as like linebackers, safeties, defensive linemen, offensive linemen, like, I think a lot of times, people just look at the fact that they haven't won a Super Bowl, and I get it, right? I get that it's been, 2 decades without a Super Bowl. So a lot of these 49er fans have never seen, the 49ers win a Super Bowl. Thankfully, you and I, we had the opportunity to be at an age where we could, see the 49ers win. But there's a lot that goes into winning the Super Bowl and staying consistently competitive. And I think people don't realize how many of those attributes Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch and Adam Peters have and have put in place. Ultimately, though, Kyle Shanahan's biggest weakness is evaluating the QB position, and it is a it's important, but if they could figure that out, either they have with Purdy, or if it's if it is Kirk Cousins next year, ultimately it's not that we're that far away that we need to blow this thing up and start all over. That's just how I feel, at least.
Well, I'm going to answer it with this super chat here. The question is what if we're not successful? And I think, to me, anything short of, anything short of going to the Super Bowl isn't successful. But to be fair, I'll just say anything short of NFC Championship is not successful. Like, you can't not make it as far as you made it last year. I'll say that. So if they lost in the divisional round, let's say, that wouldn't be successful. So what if they're not successful? I still think they're 2 years away. And when I say 2 years, I mean this year and next year. They would have to not be successful for 2 years in a row before I think it's even a consideration, in my opinion. Now, if they just didn't make the playoffs this year, okay, that might be different. But I really just don't see a path for that. I don't. So, maybe something crazy happens. I don't know. Purdy's awful. The team gets injured. They don't make the playoffs. In that scenario, yes, I think that they would potentially move on completely. Anything short of that happening, I think maybe deemed an unsuccessful season, but not a fireable unsuccessful season. And I think it would take at least 2 of those before we really have that conversation of potentially looking a different direction. That's just my opinion.
I think that I think that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch shouldn't get any extensions until they win a Super Bowl. So like ultimately I would put them on whatever the rest of their contract is. I think they're signed through 2025, I believe. That's it, right? If you don't win a Super Bowl by then, I think that York has given them ample opportunity. It would be like close to a decade of them being the regime. And if you haven't gotten a Super Bowl by then, like ultimately you just got to, start over at that point.
Yeah, unless somehow they've retooled the team on the fly. Like, I still think there's scenarios where you wouldn't necessarily start over. If they've retooled the team.
Well, what I mean by start over, I mean like new regime come in.
No. But I'm saying that I still think that there's so many ways that still wouldn't happen. Like, I really believe that if let's say they have one down season, but then they bounce back right away, kind of like Seattle did with Carroll, and then they've retooled, but they found their franchise quarterback, whether it's Purdy or somebody else, somehow in that time, then I think that there's other ways potential. Like, I think there's more ways that Shanahan and Lynch stay past 2025 than I do ways that they are not here past 2025, I guess is what I'm saying. I think there's a lot of ways. Yeah.
I personally think if they don't win a Super Bowl by 2025, that the 49ers should find somebody new. And that's coming from one of Shanahan's biggest fans, because I've seen the Eagles.
You're a Shanahan fan, but not a Shanahan stan anymore, from what I hear.
True.
That's the word on the streets.
I'm officially downgraded from a Shanahan stan to a Shanahan fan.
I heard it on Reddit, actually. There's a lot of rumors coming from there lately.
And Reddit's sometimes accurate if that's what you saw.
I'm not saying that it's not accurate. I don't know if I'm not. Listen, when people, it's so funny because when people say that they have sources or they hear something, the immediate response is like, "Oh yeah, source, trust me, bro." And people don't believe it. Well, tell me who your source is. Nobody's ever in the world of ever. Sources have never been leaked by anybody. That's not going to happen. So you asking who your source is and getting a response of "I can't tell you" is the exact response, or no response at all. And then immediately people take that and go, "Oh, well, obviously if you can't tell me your sources, then I don't believe it." It's like, you wouldn't believe it if I told you my sources.
Right.
What if I said I knew John Lynch personally? What if that's a possibility? Oh, I don't believe you. Okay, so either way, you don't believe me.
Right.
The point is that I don't know what's real and what's not when you read things like that, but I'm not going to completely dismiss them, because I do know that, the 49ers don't leak, but players do. Players are humans, and players talk to their friends, and they talk to their family members, and then those people talk, and then you know what I mean? And it goes down the line. So things definitely get out. But yes, I don't know if these rumors are true, but yeah, I do think it's funny. I do know what rumors are true, because sources told me that you are a Shanahan fan and not a Shanahan stan, though.
Yeah, and we could tell people who his source was, because it was me. I texted him. And I said, his source was me, and then he put it on Reddit, and then Reddit himself. One thing that I can say about this whole situation, there's been a lot of eye-opening kind of moments for me this offseason, more than most, Jesse. One is, the whole Shanahan thing, which, I could get upgraded back if he did make the right choice, right? So they're still out. But one thing is, I was pretty adamant that the 49ers, like when national media got rumors, it was just BS. And I think I was holding on to the whole Mac Jones and Trey Lance thing, and the media got it wrong and all that kind of stuff. But media has been more right than wrong this offseason, and maybe even last offseason when it came, the Trey Lance arm fatigue stuff. We kind of brushed that off. And now with the Sam Darnold stuff, and, how the 49ers internally were feeling about Trey Lance, and, It's
Devo
been eye opening
requesting a
for me.
trade.
Devo
Bosa may not
requesting
play week 1. Like, yeah, these
Yeah.
things are
Now
starting
I'm
to,
starting to believe that, because before I was just like, write it off. The media's been wrong so many times. Now I think, other than that Mac Jones, Trey Lance pick, which still I think I think that might have been the choice, right, between those two.
yeah,
But
there was some truth to it.
they have been pretty right on every other kind of nugget. So to me, I mean, obviously the Reddit thing is, we don't know who's coming up with that, but I'm not. Before I would just write things off. Now,
You're more apprehensive.
more apprehensive because we've been proven wrong so many times.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about the Bosa thing next, actually. Twisted Clown says, do you buy the BS $9 million angle? Couldn't they have used that money earlier in free agency, buff up the offensive line or D? $9 million. Is this about the trade freeing up $9 million, I guess?
Yeah.
Maybe. No, because they don't need that money to sign Bosa. What we have to understand is that when Bosa gets signed, you actually save more money on the salary cap. By extending Bosa, they're actually going to have more money now to spend, or then to spend, than they do now. So no, I don't buy that at all. Definitely not. Flav says, do you think Bosa has an obligation to other players to try to get as much money as possible? And could that be the factor in making it look like he's fighting for them to set the highest bar possible? No, I don't think he has the obligation. I think the players union would certainly love it. I think other players would certainly love it. That being said, he wants to just get paid. Like, I don't think Bosa cares about any of that. I also don't think he has an obligation to his teammates to be there. I don't think he has any obligation other than to get himself as much money as possible, get that generational wealth, because you never know when it's going to end, and that's all he cares about. And for right or wrong, whether you agree with that, disagree with that, or whatever, that's what's happening here. And Bosa, I said it last offseason, is not the one that you want to mess with when it comes to this. He isn't going to wait until that last season to see how much money he can get. There was never a chance of him signing last offseason. This offseason, it became very, very clear that he's going to get as much money as he can, and he is the type that will hold out as long as he can. So hopefully the 49ers figure this out and come correct, but I'm sure he's got a dollar amount, and that dollar amount is not going to change. So we'll see, man. We'll see. I think it's a good question, though. Pissed off, Brother Bob says, Nails. Finally, Sunil stopped jockeying Kyle Shanahan.
I have no faith in Brother Bob, because in 2 seconds he's gonna revoke his comment again.
He will too. He will. ASA 86 says John Lynch feeding the media CNXNS now fading to badmouth Trey Lance. I don't know. I do. You know what I do find interesting though, ASA 86, is that John Lynch did say that they are not going to allow any negotiations to play out through the media. And then like 2 days later, we hear that Bosa may not play week 1, which tells me it's now coming out through the media. So I found that interesting.
And I don't think that John Lynch, going back, because I put this on Twitter, I don't think John Lynch or Shanahan are any of these sources. I think Brian Griese has been the quote unquote mole that was really behind. Because when John Lynch started talking about how Brian Griese was one of the main reasons why Brock Purdy was selected, and he was in love with Brock Purdy, and not just his tape, but the Zoom meetings and the intangibles and all that kind of stuff. And then Brian Griese is the quarterback's coach. And, we were hearing that coaches on the staff believe in Brock Purdy much more than Trey Lance and are out on Trey Lance and all that kind of stuff. We always knew that Shanahan loved Trey Lance, right? So I'm like, what coaches would do that? Well, now we know that Brian Griese had a hand in Brock Purdy coming here. And when that's your guy, Brian Griese kind of inherited Trey Lance, but he wanted Brock Purdy. Ultimately, I think a lot of that stuff was coming out from Brian Griese. You think about how Brian Griese's, came from the announce booth, has a lot of media connections, all that kind of stuff. I think it's more been Brian Griese that's been the source of a lot of this stuff when it came to the details about the quarterback situation.
Yeah, definitely. Young Jay says, "Does the Trey Lance situation feel racist to you?" I think it depends on what sense. Like from the team, no. I've never thought that the 49ers are are racist or Kyle Shanahan is racist, and that's why Trey's not playing. It's funny because when you bring up race, a lot of people do go to that. They're like, "Oh, so you're calling Kyle Shanahan racist?" Like, no, I'm calling you racist. That's what I'm saying. But no, I think from the fan base, there's certainly a small percentage for sure. Yeah, of course, race plays into life. People get mad about it when you talk about it. But again, I always say the same thing. If you get mad about it, then you're probably who I'm talking about. So, it
I
is
think
what it
some of
is.
the coverage too, like some of the ways people went at Trey Lance was a little disrespectful, whether it
Too
was a race
much.
thing or,
Yeah.
it was just hyperbole. Either
Mhm.
way, I don't think Lance deserved some of the comments that were said about him as a player and, some of his character as well.
I think there's a cultural thing too. And we don't even have to go the race route. Like when I growing up, when I thought about the 49ers, I thought of them as like a urban franchise. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
very, very urban. The fan base was very urban. I think the franchise was urban. It's just the way that it was. And now that they're in Santa Clara, and I think, some of the fan base has maybe shifted a little bit. There's definitely a bit of a war. Like, are they an urban team? Or are they a suburban team? And I think people have their comfortabilities on where they're at. And so I think that's why you've got different types of 49ers content creators. And some people go with that urban vibe and some people go with that suburban vibe. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
leave it at that. So Twisted Clown says, Niners, Jimmy G, you're awesome. Here's the most money we can offer you. Niners, Bosa, defensive player of the year. Can't give you too much money.
So
Yeah.
so I think Ian Rappaport was on the Pat McAfee show and was
Yeah.
talking about this situation. And I think we need to not put the Niners as like, they're holding out on certain money. Like they've, like the thing is the offer that the 49ers made is significant. And I think it still makes them the highest paid edge rusher. I'm reading between the lines there, but I think Bosa is asking for like something astronomical that the 49ers didn't have in their budget for him. So it's not that the 49ers aren't willing to pay him or aren't making him a significant offer that makes him the highest paid edge rusher. It's just the amount that Bosa is looking for might be out of what they're expecting. And that's an argument that I think, you have to think about. Is Bosa worth paying him like you would pay a quarterback? Because I think ultimately that's what he's asking for right now.
Yeah. I mean, he definitely is. He definitely is. PMG says, Jesse, you ever tailgate at the stick with the wine and cheese crowd? I'll tailgate with anybody. Like I'll rub elbows with anybody. But like my inner circle is always people that, um, the people that I tend to cling to and enjoy in my personal life are people that have been through struggle. And usually you can feel that out pretty quick. Like you talk to somebody, you know if struggle's ever been a part of their life, and those are the people that I tend to kind of gravitate towards. So, but I'm cool with talking to anybody. I don't, everybody has their thing. Let's parlay this real quick. This super chat right here into the Bosa conversation, because we touched on the Reddit situation, and somebody had asked the question, had we seen the Reddit comment? And yes, we have. We don't want to speculate on whether it's true or not, because who knows? But there is another angle here. And I think, Sunil brought this up, and I think it's a great angle, which is, should he be traded? Like, at what point does it become an issue? If he's willing to sit out 8 games and you're not willing to pay him what he wants, and it's going to come to a head anyways, should they consider trading Nick Bosa? So, Sunil, I'll let you start. Do you think they should consider trading Nick Bosa?
I'll put it this way. I don't think that it should be off the table. And I say it for this reason. It depends on what you could get and what the offers are.
Yeah.
If right now, let's say Justin Herbert is on the block and Chargers are like, hey, give us Nick Bosa and a pick and we'll give you Justin Herbert. I'm doing that trade.
Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
me too.
you know, and then you mentioned, you mentioned retooling, right?
Yeah.
Well, this is the biggest asset that the 49ers have that can justify first round draft picks, right? So, I think that Nick Bosa not on the team severely impacts the 49ers ability to be a contender. I think that the
I
defense
agree.
it goes from a top 3 defense to possibly not even a top 10 defense. That's how important I think Nick Bosa is. But it kind of just depends on, but I also think that allotting quarterback money to Nick Bosa is scary as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
I agree.
that's a lot of money. That's you deciding that some other players that are elite are no longer going to be signed. Like you're making a decision that is Bosa over, the top end talent that is there. Like, so I think it's definitely discussion to be made. I think that the 49ers, I'm actually okay with the 49ers not having a blank check for Nick Bosa because ultimately that's going to be impactful in one way or another. So I'm not advocating to trade for Nick Bosa because I don't know the details of what that number is, but I'm not sitting here and being naive that it shouldn't be on the table either.
Yeah, I don't think it should be ruled out. I don't think any player is untradeable, but I do think the timing makes this really hard. If I was going to consider trading Nick Bosa, it'd be under 2 circumstances. Since the draft is already passed and you can't recoup those assets really until next offseason anyways, if I'm trading Nick Bosa now or before the trade deadline, then it's for players. Like it's got to be for good players that can help me try to win now because they're still in a win now situation. You don't just trade Nick Bosa for a bunch of picks that aren't going to help you this year.
Mm-hmm.
If you are going to trade Nick Bosa for a bunch of picks, then you do that next offseason. And here's the deal. Nick Bosa has to come back, I believe, after 8 weeks. Otherwise, he doesn't accrue a season. So even if Nick Bosa holds out, there is an end to that holdout because he's going to want to be free at the end of this next season. Now, what the 49ers can do is if they still don't come to a resolution, they can franchise tag him and then trade him next offseason. And then that's where you can go get the first round picks, flip those and draft and do what you're going to do with it. So I wouldn't trade Bosa this season or right now unless it was strictly for players that I believed have high-end talent that help this team not only win now, but in the future. The likelihood of that being the return is probably not very high. So if I'm going to even consider trading Bosa, it would come this next offseason because it should have happened this offseason if the consideration was ever going to be there. It seems like the 49ers, if they were to consider trading him, didn't think that it would ever get this far. And so if it does become an issue where he holds out into the season, they can't get a deal done, then that time comes next offseason, in my opinion.
No, I agree because even the players, Jesse, I think if it's not a quarterback, it doesn't make sense because where else, you're not trading edge guy for a guy that's of equal level of him on the edge. And where else do they really need that level of talent? So I agree with you. Like it's got to be next season because it's most likely going to be for picks. But unless they somehow get a quarterback, which fits the messiness of the initial topic about the 49ers quarterback situation always being messy.
Yeah, I think that I think that wow, I went full Kyle Shanahan there with that long but I think that trading Bosa now would completely derail the season. I mean, you talk about all the situations that have already happened this offseason. If within 1 week you trade Trey Lance and Nick Bosa, That's
Yeah.
it. I mean, that's it. You can just
Might
write
as
this
well
season
trade
off. It's over. Yeah,
CMC, Fred
it's
Warner, like
over.
just
It's over. It's over.
blow it up.
And I'm not saying that trading Trey Lance is near the impact of Bosa, but it's just the internal human side of things. There are a lot of people that did like Trey Lance in that locker room. And so now if you also get rid of Bosa, not only are you trading an elite player, but you're trading a big part of that locker room on multiple fronts. You're just not going to overcome that. And that's why they have to wait until this next offseason.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I mean, even if they eke into the playoffs and Bosa doesn't come back till week 8, doesn't matter. You're in the playoffs. Bosa's fully healthy. He's actually probably going to be fresher as you get into the playoffs. It may not be the worst case scenario. It wouldn't be ideal.
Right.
Being ideal would be getting a deal done and he's here all season, but it's possible. And I could see something like that happening and still working out in their favor.
I'm interested in your opinion on this because, I think the common trend on people who are behind Bosa is just pay Bosa, right? Are you blank check to Bosa? Just whatever number he wants?
Yeah.
Yeah, nope. I think that's something that people, like some of the fan base, doesn't wrap their mind around is where, obviously it's really, we're pro players and most, but like, sure, what's this number? Because even though the 49ers play hardball, it's never extended to this far. And we've never seen John Lynch be worried. You know what I mean? Like, and especially in this offseason, the way that they talked about the Bosa extension was we have budgeted for Bosa, and it was kind of like, this isn't going to be hard. This is going to be just, really easy kind of contract negotiations, right? The fact that it's going this way, like, at what point are we thinking maybe what Bosa's asking for is a little astronomical, right? Like, maybe the 49ers are making the right decision, not just signing him to what they're asking for, because that could potentially have ramifications for the 49ers moving forward as well. I don't know, but I think that that's one perspective to pay attention to. It can't just be like, the 49ers are being cheap. I don't think they're being cheap. You know what I mean? Especially with a player of this talent that's so important. We got to think, what is Bosa asking for? What's that number? Because maybe they're being smart by not doing it.
I think you can be really on both sides with this. I do. I think, like, for me, when I look at the situation, I look at it and say, if I totally understand Bosa trying to get all the money that he can, and I think he should. I also say that if the 49ers truly want to get this done, it is on them. Like, they have to make the decision. And if they decide to sign Bosa, or if they decide to meet those demands, he'll be in the building tomorrow. If they don't decide to meet those demands, once we figure out what those demands are, I may agree with them. So I think you can agree with both. I understand what Bosa is doing. I'm not mad at him. I'm not one of those guys that's like, oh, get your ass in the building. You make plenty of money. No, I get it. I understood it with Debo. I didn't like that he requested a trade so early in the offseason, but I understood what he was doing, and I was all about him getting paid. So I am pro player, but I'm also understanding the 49ers side of things, and I do think there's a limit to what you're going to pay him. If he wants $40 million a year, I'm like, kick rocks, dude. I'm not paying you $40 million a year if I'm the 49ers. Now, I understand why he would want it, but that's great. I'm not paying it. Somebody else can pay that to you. We'll see. So, we'll see how this thing plays out, but I'm officially in the worried zone is what I'll say. It's officially become a concern of mine. The fact that the final preseason game has been played, the final 53 has been set, especially if they make it through tomorrow, where they set their practice squad and all of that has happened. I would say the panic button needs to be hit tomorrow at the end of the day for me.
Yeah, so. I agree. And I think that, I'm not worried about Bosa not being capable of playing, because I think he's in ultimate shape. And even if he showed up week one, like on game day was his first day in pads and playing with the team, I think he'll still go out and have multiple sacks against the Steelers. It's more about, it doesn't seem like negotiations are going well. It doesn't seem like they're close from reports,
Yeah,
right? And now that I
no,
believe
it doesn't.
reports, now that I'm on team believe reports, I'm
Yeah,
worried.
yeah. All right, let's get through these super chats. ASA86 says, not a good look race-wise, new low for black quarterbacks. ASA86, here's what I would say. Uh, when it comes to the whole race thing, this is not a new low. The new low is coming potentially with the John Gruden case. Pay attention to that. John Gruden seems like he's out for blood. Doesn't sound like he's willing to be paid off. Remember, he was let go because of leaked emails. And I think he's willing to expose anybody and everybody in this league. So I'm
Can,
curious to see what comes from
can
that.
we go back to that one? Because I'm interested in, I don't know what perspective he's saying it's a new low, but I think sometimes we put race in a certain situation, and if things don't go the way we want it to go, we kind of put it on the race. Look, I think that ultimately the decisions around Trey Lance from a team perspective were on his level of play. And I don't think it had anything to do with his race. They obviously invested a lot of draft capital to go up and pick him. Ultimately, this team, especially Kyle Shanahan, has done a lot to put black players, black coaches into the league. I think he has probably 75% of the minority coaches in the league have come from his tree. I think it sets us back when we start making statements like that, where it's like, this is a new low or whatever the case may be, because ultimately I think one of the debates or one of the issues where when it came to black quarterbacks, they weren't looked at as quarterbacks. They were looked at as athletes. And ultimately, I think that even though this sounds weird, like them saying that they don't believe that he's a like good enough quarterback for this system or whatever they're saying, they're still looking at him as a quarterback, right? They're not saying that he should be playing a different position and all that kind of stuff. They're not saying that he can't process the playbook and he's not smart enough to be playing in the position. So I think it's really, really important when we talk about race. And I know this is super sensitive and I'll jump off of my soapbox, but like not everything has to be, a new low or talking about black quarterbacks in that way. Ultimately, Trey Lance has always been looked at as a quarterback. He's always been looked at as a smart guy, high character, all of these types of things. The fact that he's just being treated like a quarterback that might not fit in this system, or they found somebody who they feel is better in Brock Purdy, I think it's not a new low for black quarterbacks. Ultimately, nothing has been questioned about his athletic ability, his ability to play the position, to be in the right position, or the kind of mental things that previous black quarterbacks had to deal with, as recent as Lamar Jackson, who people thought should be switching positions versus playing the quarterback position.
Ooh, I don't know if that conversation hasn't been brought up. I feel like I've seen that one a lot. He's not very athletic. He doesn't go through his reads. He doesn't, and you've heard that from national media as well. I think that trope is unchanged. But to say it, if he was out of the league, then yes, I would understand this comment. But I also do understand where this thought can come from as well. Like I said, for me, I think the new low for the league is going to be this John Gruden case, and that's what I would pay attention to. And it's not just a quarterback thing; it's a league-wide thing. So I'm curious to see what comes from that. All right, Flav says, in my opinion, the 49ers waiving fines and not really any drama makes me think that it's done, and I could see them wanting to wait until after cuts for some strategic advantage. I say 95% chance Bosa is there by Sunday. If that were true, Flav, and that's why I say I'm worried starting tomorrow, end of day, because that's when all of those moves that they're trying to angle with would be done, is by end of business tomorrow. So if we don't hear anything tomorrow or the next day, then I think this theory that it's done goes out the window, in my opinion. I'm not going to say that it's not possible that it's done and that they would wait, especially if it just got done. But I do think there is a lot of people that have felt and have said this weeks ago, oh, the deal's already in place. It's been in place. They're just giving them the offseason. That window has been slammed shut at this point. That is not the case. Now, they may have just struck a deal in the last 24 hours and they're waiting because they want to make these roster moves. That actually does make a little bit of sense to me. But all the sense on that goes completely out the window into business tomorrow, in my opinion. So we'll see how this plays out, Flav. Young Jay says, I have a theory. I want to say when you open the line. All right. I think I'll be doing a call in most likely tomorrow. So drop it then. I3, I guess. I don't know what this is. Bosa for Penei Sewell and Aiden Hutchinson to the Lions. I would probably do that deal, actually. Yeah. I don't think the Lions would do that deal, but I would probably do that deal. That, by the way, is the type of deal that I'm talking about, is if you're going to make that trade now, that's the type of deal it would have to be. Otherwise, you wait till next offseason. I think that's exactly what I'm looking for. 808 Niner says, you think Nick is asking for fully guaranteed? I hope not. I don't think there's a team in the league that will give that to him. So there's that. Twisted Clown says Lamar and Hamilton for Bosa. Well, Trey's gone. Oh, coulda, shoulda. Okay. For Bosa, Trey, and BA, coulda, shoulda. Yeah, I mean, that would have been great.
Who's Hamilton?
Their safety. Their top safety. He could be like a linebacker though too. I mean, he's massive, absolutely massive. Yeah, coulda, shoulda. ASA 86 says, I agree. Bringing up race is tricky. Leave it alone. Yeah, I mean, I don't subscribe to the leave it alone either. Sunil and I have had these conversations. We're not afraid to. In fact, and this was completely separate from the Trey Lance thing. Last offseason, we went pretty deep on that conversation. And I forget what made us think of it. It was not Lance related at all. I think just being afraid to have the conversation is how things get stuck and don't change. But I think bringing it up when it doesn't necessarily have a place makes it also to where that to me leaves us in a spot where we're just as stuck as not bringing it up when it needs to be brought up. So I think there's a time and a place, and I'm not afraid to have the conversation by any means, but bringing it up when it doesn't deserve to be brought up, I think also is where it can be tricky as well. So
I think the kind of point that I probably didn't articulate well enough is, I don't think that criticism of Trey Lance as a quarterback necessarily means that you have some kind of racial bias or whatever.
No, I agree. I agree. Yes.
Well, the reason why I'm saying it, Jesse, and it's not you. Obviously, we know each other and we talk, but some of the fan base and some of the people who are, backing Trey Lance. Unfortunately, anytime you criticize Trey Lance, that's something that gets brought up. Right, it becomes a racial thing. So when the original comment from Asa and I, I'm glad that they followed up with this. But the original comment, what I was trying to make is Trey Lance has always been looked at as a quarterback, and the criticisms of him has been on his play, I believe. And even the processing thing and things like that. I think we're more about not because he's necessarily black. I think it's just. He hasn't played a lot of football. He hasn't necessarily been somebody who's thrown the ball out or been, as ingrained. Just doesn't have the reps, right? He always gets better with the reps. But ultimately, to me, I think he's been judged as a player. And I think that is where at least we've gotten to a place where you're being judged as a player versus assumptions about you coming in because of, the skin color that you have.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, I mean, I think for the most part that is also true. There definitely are pockets, right? Like that I know to be true. I've seen it in my comments. I've seen it on Twitter and whatever. But it is a small, loud group. It's a minority that is very loud and can sway your opinion on maybe what the view is and where it's coming from. So. Cryptic says, truth of the matter, not every player can get their max. Trent, Debo, CMC, Warner, Kittle, Hargrave, and now Bosa. There is a salary cap to manage. there is a salary cap to manage. And I think that is also what makes this very, very tricky, is that the 49ers, the way that they build their contracts, there's always outs within a couple years. And the money guaranteed is not as much. Like the overall contract may be the max, but what they're guaranteeing is not a lot in some cases. And usually after like 2 or 3 years, there's an out in case the 49ers want to exercise that. I think with Bosa, what makes this tricky is he's not going to allow you to get away with just making him the highest paid on paper. He wants the most guaranteed. And I doubt that he's going to give you, and I say you, the 49ers, an out after 3 years or 2 years. Like that's just not going to be the way. Now, it may end up happening that way potentially, but right now I could see that being a holdup as well. Maybe they agree on the overall money, but they don't agree on the guarantees, and they don't agree on the 49ers having leverage after 2 or 3 years. And that could be a holdup because that is how the 49ers structure their deals. That's how they've been able to keep all these players at such a high rate, is because they've structured their deals that way, which means it allows them to restructure their deals a couple years in and push money back, that type of stuff. So, and remain flexible if they ever want to trade them. 49ers Glory says, history says every time the Niners sign a big contract, they have a down year. San Francisco could get a player and top picks and make up for the lost Lance assets. Yeah, I think they can, but I think there's a time and place. And again, for me, that is next offseason. Or it would have been this offseason prior to the draft, but not now. Flav says Bosa to the Cowboys for Lance and Brandon Aubrey. Could you imagine? You know what? There's this really good quarterback over there that we like. We're gonna look into him. That's what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about the quarterback that is the 49ers quarterback. He's our quarterback. What is it about Brock Purdy that makes him right for this team right now? And what do you think? What do you think he brings to the 49ers that they like so much?
I think he sees the game the way that Kyle Shanahan sees the game.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately that was the biggest deciding factor between him and Trey Lance is Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy seemed to just fit right when Brock Purdy jumped into, the starting role. It seemed like, and I think maybe part of it is his limitations that as a quarterback, like he doesn't have the arm strength that Trey Lance has. He doesn't have necessarily the quote unquote athleticism, even though Brock Purdy to me is extremely athletic. He definitely can get out of trouble with his legs. But I think because he doesn't necessarily have that strong arm, like he just goes where the design tells him to go, right? He just goes to where the ball's supposed to go, where the read's supposed to go. And ultimately you can just tell. And I think I mentioned this during when he started going, we were doing our streams. I was like, Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan just seem to be on the same page right away. And I think that ultimately is one thing. And then just as intangibles, right? We heard how the team responded to him. It was not, he didn't carry himself like a rookie. And he has this like ability to ball out and still really be humble and give all the praise to his team. And I think that ultimately bought him a lot of like, I guess, currency with the team around him. And I think the team just loves to play with him, man. I think the guys really enjoy, him being the quarterback, him being the leader. And, I think that, obviously there's probably going to be a little bit of a pullback just because now there's film on him and people have, 7-8 games of him playing. So they're going to know kind of what he's able to do, what he's not able to do. But it's hard to argue with the production that he had, the amount of 2 touchdown games he had, how the 49ers were scoring with him there. And even though I'm big on, hey, I think CMC is the main reason why this 49er offense started scoring the way that they scored. Like there was, a difference between Jimmy G as the quarterback and Brock Purdy when it came to, the scoring. And obviously the defense played a role in that and all that kind of stuff. But I think his intangibles, Jesse, I think that his ability to see the game more similarly to Kyle Shanahan and his ability to just really get the team to buy into him, I think are the three biggest things that really separated him from the other quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think for me, I've seen that a lot where a lot of people will question, like, okay, what about when the film's out on him? And I do think for me that's not a concern. It's just a question mark. But I also have said multiple times that I think I don't if you're going to see a drop off from Brock Purdy, I really don't think it comes this year. I don't. I mean, unless barring a ton of injuries. Now, if CMC goes down and Trent Williams go down or something crazy like that, or CMC and Kittle go down, then maybe you see it. But assuming these weapons for the most part are healthy, I don't think film coming out on Brock Purdy is going to be his downfall. I'm more curious to what it looks like next year because I have confidence in him this year. That's why I said he's Mr. Right now, but I don't know if he's Mr. Right because when that talent starts getting stripped away, that's when I start to have questions. And the reason I don't have those questions for this year, assuming health for the most part with this roster, is because of some of those things that you talked about. His leadership. I mean, you see it. He oozes leadership. You saw it at Iowa State, by the way. That was something that everybody talked about that came in and out of that program. It's something that his coach talked about. You saw the way that they embraced in that final home game. Like, it was clear that Brock Purdy brought something different to that organization, I guess you can call it, that program, that school. And the leadership is definitely there. You also saw it on the Thursday night football game against Seattle, where Kittle's wearing the stupid Jimmy G t-shirt. And he's like, dude, like, this guy doesn't ever shut up. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you just see it. He's not afraid. So I think there's that. I think he's poised. I think there's a fearlessness to his game, despite some of the maybe physical limitations. He plays as if he has none, which can be a bad thing. I mean, you saw it with Jimmy Garoppolo. I would say in his situation, it was a bad thing. I think sometimes for Brock Purdy, it can be a situation where he puts the ball in harm's way where he doesn't necessarily need to. But I would say for the most part, when it comes to Brock Purdy, that fearlessness is something that he needs to continue to have. And I think that is something that makes him as good as he has been. You talked about athleticism. No, he's not going to run a straight line speed 40 very fast, but he's very quick and he can get away from defenders in the pocket. And I think that is a massive asset. That is something that Jimmy G never had and Jimmy G would never have. And so I think that is a big reason why he works with Kyle Shanahan. He is a player that you can run boot actions and those types of things with. You can move the launch point with and know that he's going to get out there quick enough to make these throws and move the pocket. And I think that is a staple of the Shanahan offense that really has been missing for Kyle here in San Francisco. And then the last thing is he gets the ball to his weapons. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having a lot of weapons and knowing how to get the ball to them and letting them do the work. Like that's not a bad thing. You know what I mean? There's
that's kind of what you're supposed to do, right?
That is what you're like. He's a point guard, like a traditional true point guard in the sense of, Patrick Mahomes, if he's the quarterback is a point guard. If Patrick Mahomes is Steph Curry, I don't think there's anything wrong with being Chris Paul or John Stockton. You're talking about very, very good players that are top 10 all time in their position. Like, if you could be that your whole career and you continue to have weapons around you that can do with the ball what the 49ers weapons can do now, you can play for a very, very long time in this league. Now, it's not my preference at the quarterback position. We've had this conversation when we talked about a Drew Brees versus a Ben Roethlisberger. I'm taking Ben Roethlisberger, no question, but people would take Drew Brees and they would prefer that. And so that is totally fine. So those are the things why, like, those are the reasons to me why Brock Purdy works right now, specifically for this team. And then, the last thing would be exactly what you touched on, which is he and Shanahan just seem to click. They see the game very similarly. That's what Shanahan wants, and it works out. So,
yeah, and I mean, I the offense looks great under him for a lot of the things that you mentioned. And, you know, I think one of the biggest criticisms of Brock Purdy, which I think isn't a fair criticism, Jesse, is the Jimmy G criticism. They're like, oh, well, Jimmy G had 5 games where he went undefeated, and you know, and all this. And I'm like, all right, I understand what people are saying. Like, okay, after just a short amount of time, you know, you can't all of a sudden just know this is the guy. However, the 49ers don't have to make him $100 million quarterback. Like the benefit of Brock Purdy is he's under contract. He's still a rookie contract. They still have at least 2 years before they have to make a decision on paying him like a quote unquote franchise quarterback or not. So it's like the ideal situation. Like we get to finally see exactly what we have in Brock Purdy without having to give, you know, the farm to him financially like they did with Jimmy G. Ultimately, I think that most people wouldn't have had a problem with Jimmy G if he was $1 million a year, right? Because you're able to put the type of talent around him that Jimmy G could, you know, look good with, right? That's the same thing with Brock Purdy. Now, ultimately, you know, when that talent starts to dissipate, then we get to see if Brock Purdy is the quote unquote real deal or not. But he's a really, really great quarterback for what this roster is right now. And I don't think it's fair to constantly like be like they're doing the same thing that they did with Jimmy G, because it's not the same situation. The Jimmy G issue was they paid him too early. They're not paying Brock Purdy too early. They're just giving him an opportunity to really see who he is.
Do you think that Brock Purdy's situation is saving the 49ers from themselves? Meaning they literally cannot, even if they wanted to, Brock Purdy cannot get paid right now. He has to accrue 3 seasons. So, but if he could get paid or had to get paid, do you think the 49ers would have paid him? Because I do. I think Brock Purdy's contract and situation is kind of saving them from themselves, because I think they would make that potential mistake again.
Obviously, this is all hypothetical from both of us.
It is 100% hypothetical. Yep.
I think the situation that they were in year one of their first year GM, first year head coach, I think you get a little bit excited when you're having all of this lack of success, and then you see this good-looking, chiseled jaw goes out there, wins 5 straight games, and all this kind of stuff. I think they may have jumped the gun because they were all pretty nice. Like it was new, right? New, exciting, shiny. Let's go out there and get this done. I believe, and I know a lot of people don't believe this, I think that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch learned from their mistakes. So I would believe that they wouldn't necessarily make the same mistake. And I think it's showing in the fact that they even traded Trey Lance. That's not something like the mistake was, hey, you didn't get behind your quarterback the way that you did. You didn't give him the confidence, all that kind of stuff. They rectify that by trading Trey Lance. They think Brock Purdy's their guy, and they're doing what people wish they did with Trey Lance with Brock Purdy. So to me, I don't think so. I think that they're actually playing this smart because of the situation. I don't think that they would have prematurely paid this quarterback. But once again, we're all hypothetical. So
yeah, I definitely do. I think they would. If he was going to get paid in this, excuse me, if he was going to get paid this offseason, I think they would have done kind of what the Giants just did for Daniel Jones. I'm not saying they would have paid him what they did last time where they made Jimmy G the highest paid quarterback, but I think they would have paid him a lot of money this offseason if they had to.
Like tied themselves to him for years. Yeah. Well, you know, you're a hater, so I could see why you would say that.
No, that's a possibility. Yeah, for sure. That's also true. What Brock did last year is just not normal. Great team, easy schedule, etc. Even if you agree to all that, it still was not normal for any rookie. From a composure standpoint, it's special. No, I agree with Flav. It is not normal. He did do special things, but that does not make him a special player. And I think that's where I think a lot of people look at him doing something special which we can all agree on. It was special. It was different. It was unique. It was great. Where we disagree is a lot of people then take that and say, okay, this is who he is always and forever, and this is who he's always going to be. And that's where I say, I need to see it more. I'm not going to say that is who he's always going to be.
Yeah. This could be Linsanity all over again.
Sure.
But, hopefully not.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. Hopefully not. Because they do need to find their guy. Cryptic says, in your opinion, what makes a franchise quarterback? Does he have to win a Super Bowl? Nope. Or have the ability to still lead even without constant weapons? That second part is more where I'm at. Stu, here's the thing. You can have franchise quarterbacks that don't win Super Bowls. You can have non-franchise quarterbacks that do win Super Bowls. For me, it's just about the ability to always be in the conversation because of your quarterback. Justin Herbert, actually, we'll use Allen. Josh Allen's a great example. I don't know if Josh Allen's ever going to win a Super Bowl. Dan Marino never won a Super Bowl. But you're always going to be in the conversation because those players exist. That regardless of the team around them, they're always going to be in the conversation. When you strip away talent from Patrick Mahomes, who thought, raise your hand if you thought going into last year losing Tyreek Hill would result in a Super Bowl for them? Because I didn't. That's how great he is. He transcends the talent regardless. And now people this offseason are like, and that, by the way, that receiving core is not looking great. They're still like, it's fine. Like, they'll be fine. Oh, Chris Jones might hold out for 8 weeks. They'll be fine. That's because of Patrick Mahomes. You don't get to say that for many quarterbacks. For me, a franchise quarterback is somebody that transcends the game regardless of the talent around him and is consistently top 10 at the position. And year in and year out, there are quarterbacks that make it into the top 10 and then they're out of the top 10. Guys like Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray, Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr. These are guys that may enter the top 10, but they're not mainstays in the top 10. You have very few mainstays, usually about 7 or 8 in the league at a time that are mainstays in the top 10. And when you see those guys, those are franchise quarterbacks, in my opinion. Everybody else, the Kirk Cousins, the Derek Carrs, the Dak Prescotts, those are the guys, in my opinion, that can put your franchise in purgatory for a very long time because they're going to get paid like those top 10 guys, but they don't bring what those top 10 guys bring. And so now when you start to strip away talent around them, they cannot deliver, and likely you're not going to win a Super Bowl because of it. So that's how I look at franchise quarterbacks. Do you have any difference of opinion, Sunil?
Yeah, I mean, I think that ultimately I agree with most of what you said. I think it's unfair to constantly use Patrick Mahomes because he's not only a franchise quarterback, he's like probably going to go down as the greatest.
That's why I brought it, because Josh Allen may not ever win one with Patrick Mahomes in the league. Like, that's a possibility, but he still transcends everybody around him, regardless.
And I think Justin Herbert is a good example as well. Like, he's somebody who, just came into the league in the same division as Patrick Mahomes. So, that changes things. But, I just, it's very hard to find those guys, right? And ultimately you get very few chances, and you have to be in the first round to find these guys usually. And, unfortunately, it looks like the 49ers may have blown their chance at that, regardless of if they picked the wrong player or didn't develop them the right way. Them getting it through the draft now isn't an option. It seems like it's either got to be Brock Purdy, develop him into that, or, a free agent if one ever comes up. And usually that's not very often.
No, I agree with. It is not easy to find by any means. I'm just of the thought that if you don't have one, you're not paying who you currently have. You're constantly trying to find one. So every year you should be drafting one in hoping that maybe you hit the lottery. And when it comes time to pay big money to your non-franchise guy, you're willing to let them walk, usually via trade, so that you can gain more assets, and you're just constantly trying to find that guy. I mean, that's just my opinion, but
sure.
Flav says, can you think of someone who by all accounts is not supposed to belong, believe they belong so unwaveringly that it's really crazy when you think about it? You're talking about Brock Purdy? Uh yeah, I don't know. I never
I think
thought
there's a
that he
lot.
didn't belong, but I think there is a lot of people that fit that mold. Not a lot of people, but there's certainly players that have fit that mold, no doubt about it.
I
Yes,
think
of course.
everybody that isn't like a superstar that's been like a fringe player, these undrafted players, like
Yeah.
all of those guys have unwavering confidence in themselves to be able to make such a prestigious unit, right? Everybody that plays football wants to be in the NFL. And there's highly touted, talented guys that go first, second, and third round, but majority of everybody's team is undrafted or low draft pick, right? So all of those guys have that same belief that they belong, even though maybe people didn't think that they belonged. So I don't think I think it's just the position that Brock Purdy in as a quarterback for a team that had Super Bowl aspirations. And obviously being the last pick of the draft, there was a lot of just, Disney movie kind of moments that were in this story that I think just shined a light on him. And not to take away from Brock Purdy, but there's a lot of players in this league that have a similar story to Brock Purdy. They're just not quarterbacks in the league. You could say even on our team, Emmanuel Mosley. That's a guy who's an undrafted free agent that just, made it to, a starting position. I guarantee you his attributes are similar to what Brock Purdy is for him to get into that position.
Yeah, and I think you've definitely seen it in rare moments through the quarterback position as well. I mean, Kurt Warner does exist.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about a guy that was told no forever, goes from literally bagging groceries to multiple Super Bowl MVP and smashing records. Like multiple league MVP and smashing records. Like, yeah, it's crazy. Steve Young. Yeah, Steve Young was told he belonged, then he was told he doesn't belong, and sat behind Joe Montana for many, many, many years, and then he belonged again. Drew Brees was told he belonged, and then he had a shoulder surgery, and then maybe he didn't belong. I don't think Purdy's unique in that. I do think that that's what makes Purdy a very good player in this moment, though, for sure. And he needs that. He absolutely does need that, for sure, if he's going to continue to be that guy. Flav says the last comment, my prediction, Purdy and the Niners ball week 1. Everyone says Purdy is the real deal. Week 2, he and the Niners don't play great. They eke out a win and possibly lose, and people say I knew he was a bust. Yeah, one thing that I can tell you, Flav, is that I'm going to remain consistent. You're not going to hear me. First of all, he can't be a bust. He's already outplayed his contract. So let me say that. He cannot be a bust. He's already exceeded everything that was expected of him. So that's not possible. But from me, you will get consistency. I'm not going to get too high or too low on Brock Purdy. If I tell you that I need 3 years from a player, I'm not then going to come in week 4 and be like, I told you he's not the guy. No, I'm going to give him all this year. And I mean, if it looks awful and it's a complete regress, then I'll be like, yeah, maybe we don't necessarily need to see year 3. But as long as that doesn't happen, I'm probably going to want to see a third year from Brock Purdy. So good or bad, I'm not going to get too high or too low on who Brock Purdy is, because I told you, and I've said it forever, 3 years, 3 years, 3 years, and 3 years. So that's where I'm going to be with it. All right, let's get into this. Actually, let's not do this one. Let's just end on this one here. Confidence in the team. We went through the schedule. I believe I had them at 12-5. You were somewhere near that, Sunil, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. Has your confidence wavered at all right now where we're at today versus where you were at when we did those schedule predictions?
I think I'm actually more confident in 2 phases, but the special teams phase, I'm a lot less confident in. So I don't know how much that's going to impact the overall team. But when I look at the roster, man, I think the offensive line is going to be better this year than it was last year. I think this offense is actually going to be better this year, more than last year, because a full year of CMC and the continuity of the quarterback play and the offensive line. And I think Brandon Ayuk is going to be awesome this year. So I think all of that points to this offense is going to be a lot better. I think that this defense, as long as Bosa comes back, also is going to be better.
Yeah, it's a big if. It's a big if right now.
Yeah. So I mean, clearly, if Bosa doesn't re-sign, then this take is trash because they're not better. I have less confidence if Bosa is not on this team. So I'm assuming Bosa comes back, Jesse, for this. Because the short answer is if Bosa doesn't come back, no. I don't think they win 12 games.
Yeah, no.
But
no, that's, that I agree with. Yes, I completely agree with that.
But assuming Bosa comes back, I do think that the defense actually has the potential to even be better than last season. The one thing that's a big fall off right now is the special teams because we don't have a healthy kicker right now. And also the return game, our best returners are injured as well. So that's the phase that I'm a little bit, that's questionable for me, but offense, defense, I actually believe we have the potential to be even better than last season.
This is This is nasty work, Gucci Mane. Nasty work. Absolutely not. Although, Gucci, I'll say this. I think you might be projecting. Let's see what's in your background. How much memorabilia do you have? You need to prove to me you're a 49er fan. How do I know that you're not in here trolling from another team, Gucci man? Just saying. I got to see it. But that is nasty work. Gross. Of all teams, at least give me like the Lions or something. Why the Cowboys? Like that's
because they just traded for Trey.
Oh, I got it. Okay. Yeah, either way, that's still nasty work. But when it comes to the confidence in the team, assuming Bosa plays, I'm still pretty confident. I mean, maybe I go from a 12-win team to an 11-win team. The special teams does worry me. I'm not going to lie. I don't know that they have a kicker, Sunil, and that's huge.
I'm out on third draft Michigan guys at the 49ers draft. Like, I mean, Moody hasn't played yet, so maybe he'll. But Ambry Thomas made me look like a fool. Now Jake Moody, we yet to see, but I don't know. We'll see.
Do you think that's like Harbaugh's way of sabotaging the 49ers from afar? Take my guys; they're really good. I promise.
No, I think it's just Kyle Shanahan having the ability to pick in the third round. They only give him that option in third round, and he tends to not pick the right guys.
I would say my overall confidence hasn't wavered a ton, maybe slightly, but it really comes down to the kicking, man. And I don't know that Robbie Gould's walking through that door. I never was big on the rookie kicker thing. I mean, I definitely was very, very loud from the moment they drafted him that I was not a fan of that. So I'm definitely not a fan after seeing him miss multiple kicks and then get injured. And then the kickers that they're working out, I'm like, really? Like this? Robbie Gould is out there. Mason Crosby's out there. These are two very good kickers. They're not going after any one of them. That's wild. So that is where my confidence is a little bit shaky because you can lose a game easily because of a missed field goal or not being able to take a field goal attempt. And because of that, you go for it on fourth down and don't get it, something like that. So for me, that is a concern, a big concern right now. And it should be.
Yeah. I still am gonna I made the prediction that Jake Moody is gonna win us 2 games because he's our kicker. I'm still gonna stick to that.
How many does he lose?
Stop that. How dare you? How dare you?
Gucci Mane says, I went to the Seahawks playoff game last year when it was raining. Well, then that means you've committed yourself to all the playoff games this year. Congratulations, because we won that game. So now you have to be in attendance. That's just the way that it works. I don't make the rules. I just follow them. Right. That said, we're an hour 23 in. We didn't even get to all of our topics because it is going so long, but I got a hurricane to prep for, and I think everything's going to be okay, but you never know. So I'm going to go finish prepping what I need to prep. Some last second things, pun intended. Sunil, thank you for joining me. I'll be back. Barring I have power, I'll be back tomorrow night with Grant, and then we'll probably do a call-in show over here. So get ready. Oh, hold on. One last one. Bosa trade will be the worse than the Haley trade. That might be true. Definitely might be true. definitely don't do it this offseason. This season, you have to wait till next offseason if you're going to consider doing it. That being said, love y'all. Peace.